The Game of Thrones Arya Stark sequel. This will be amazing, especially after Game of Thrones ended. Imagine Arya Stark being behind her target. She wants to assassinate them. She pulls out her sword and starts yelling, "Ah!" and charges at them. A true assassin of the ages. What could possibly go wrong? Oh.
Who are you?
The last thing you're ever going to see is a Stark smiling down at you as you die.
Ooh.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. George R. R. Martin just teased that he was working on a new Game of Thrones project with Maisie Williams, Arya Stark herself, and it sounds like it's the long-spoken of Arya sequel that they talked about right after the original series ended.
Bruh! Okay, I'm gonna be real, okay? Arya Stark is the worst. The reason that a lot of people liked her in the first place in Game of Thrones is very simple. Because they're pedophiles. There you go. Cat's out of the bag, asshole. It is what it is. But now that she no longer interests them because she's slowly turning into a fucking goblin, yeah, I mean, can we get someone who is not visibly manly British?
Several years ago, so we'll break it all down. There are a couple other big announcements this week too, like that was just part of the big announcements. There's a brand new Night of the Seven Kingdoms trailer that they're getting ready to release. They officially announced the Game of Thrones movie is in development. I've already done a video about that. I'll post a link at the end of this. And they're also making a production just focused solely on the story of the tourney at Harrenhal with Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark. So if you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get videos of everything. I'll be doing episode videos.
Do you think Game of Thrones gets completely sacked the moment when they start to do this thing, that thing, this thing, and no one understands how they actually tie into each other?
For Night of the Seven Kingdoms next year, because House of the Dragon Season 3 won't premiere until 2026, so Night of the Seven Kingdoms is like our next big Game of Thrones series. But during George R. R. Martin's recent blog post, as of me posting this video, he made a couple of announcements, notably the tourney at Harrenhal production and developing the special project, quote-unquote, with Maisie Williams that sounds like he was really excited about. And
bro, can this fat loser just, not do all of this useless crap and finish his stupid book that's gonna fail at the end because he is absolutely... He is just a communistic loser that doesn't believe good exists and that good is stupid, so he can't really finish the books in any way that anyone will even remotely like. Like, can he at least kind of fail his books and then do all of this shit, except just standing right there in the limelight constantly, trying to gobble up that attention? Please? I mean, shit, it's a miracle he survived, the unknown origins virus, okay? But man, come on. Your fingers are not gonna get less sausagey. It's only gonna be harder to write.
Wanted to do for a long time. So this is his actual quote about that. We also got together with Maisie Williams for pizza and pasta and talked about ...
Of course he fucking ate 15 pizzas.
Well, no, better not get into that. We don't want to jinx it, but it could be so much fun.
Then I'll just go back
Jesus.
and play Arya Stark, so everyone will win at some point. Why can't we get a
Why can't we get a non-goblin?
series starring Maisie Williams as Arya Dread Pirate Stark as she searches for new land, runs a crew, looks for buried treasure, saves those who need to be saved?
The reason why everyone thinks this is the Arya Stark sequel series that's been rumored since the original series ended is because it was one of the strongest contenders for the next series when the original Game of Thrones ended in 2019. Of all the billions of sequel and prequel ideas that HBO had, the Arya Stark ending from that original Game of Thrones Season 8 had the most sequel energy to it. She was heading off to sail west of Westeros and have totally new adventures.
I'm not going back north.
Where are you going?
What's west of Westeros? No one knows. It's where all the maps stop.
God fucking damn it. What an absolute goblin.
Obviously, the follow-up question is, what were those adventures? Whereas all the other main characters were going back to their homes, like Sansa had convinced new King Bran Stark to let her cede the north of the Seven Kingdoms and name herself Queen of the North like the ancient kings of winter before Aegon's conquest. Bran...
Oh, man. What's his face? What's his face? The game that everyone fucking wanted. What a stupid choice.
The winter before Aegon's conquest, Bran Stark had just become the most boring king in the history of Westeros. The whole reason why they
Bro,
picked him was because a king who knew everyone's secrets and knew everything would best be able to keep the peace. So everyone was basically voting him.
bro, he's literally visibly brain damaged at this point, okay? He barely has the ability to speak full sentences, and when he does, he talks in riddles, okay? Not exactly a great choice for a king.
him in, knowing that he was the boring choice because they didn't want any more drama between the different realms or great houses. That is like the opposite of an interesting sequel pitch. Bran became king, and then nothing interesting or crazy ever happened ever again. In Jon Snow, even though Kit Harington, we learned, tried to get his sequel series going the last couple of years, also headed north of the Wall to live with the wildlings, it sounded like not a whole lot was going on up there on a very universe-ending scale like you would normally expect for a big Jon Snow sequel series, which was part of the problem, according to Kit Harington. From what he said, George R. Martin wasn't helping them develop the story, and they just could not come up with an interesting or compelling enough idea that would merit a big enough show that would feel like an honorable successor to the original Game of Thrones series. I'm sure there are at least a couple people out there that would love to see Jon Snow just shuffling around, brooding in the North, not really doing anything for 8 to 10 episodes, but in reality, that's not like a really compelling show. Jon Snow reading the Weirwood
Hey, it would get a couple of views.
phone book with Bran Stark for 10 episodes. The whole beauty of an Arya Stark sequel is that she's going to a totally unexplored Western continent in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. George R. R. Martin was very clear about that. Like, nobody has gone to the Western continent and survived to come back and tell everyone what is on that continent. There are a lot of people that have sailed there and never come back. Presumably, a lot of them that survived just never did come back. We'll get into that in a second, too, because there are a couple canonical references to the Western continent throughout A Song of Ice and Fire that they can also use for some interesting scenarios for the Arya Stark sequel series. But the idea is that nothing from the Western continent has any real bearing on the original main story, for example. That's the important thing.
I can already imagine episode 1, by the way. Arya Stark gets on the boat. Then we see a stormy night and maybe a little bit of cold and shit. And after saying everything is lost and hopeless, we're dying at sea, even though we have been out here what feels for 5 seconds, and bam, they find a new continent. Woo! Yeah, I bet that that's what's gonna happen. Again, Game of Thrones got really, really good with just teleporting in the last couple of seasons. So I have no doubt that this show is going to be teleporting all around.
There's no real chance of any of her future story ruining or somehow diminishing the original story. And unlike the problem we run into with prequels, like we have right now with House of the Dragon, because Arya would be a totally new story, none of the book readers or people who watch the original show would have any idea of what's going on. The original series wouldn't potentially spoil any of her future story. The actual place where Arya is sailing during Game of Thrones Season 8 ending here is she's departing from Blackwater Bay at King's Landing, but her ship is sailing around the southern edge of Westeros and then due west through the Sunset Sea to the western continent. That's this area here, the entire Sunset Sea on the edge of Westeros.
Obviously, House of the Dragon came back, and I think, like a lot of people, I was like, finally now feel like I have like perspective on it. I can't believe that they did that.
Within the
She doesn't even look like a real person. It seems like that there's almost a body here, but someone decided, hey, you know, what's going to be funny? Adding 3 chins.
Original Song of Ice and Fire novels, there are rumors from sailors, the Ironborn, that the northern part of this Sunset Sea is filled with krakens, leviathans, and sea dragons. They briefly got into this in the earlier seasons of Game of Thrones during Season 3 when Daenerys' dragons had grown a little larger and basically started going fishing in the Eastern Sea, diving below the waves. So if you wondered, regular dragons can dive below the water at least briefly. It is totally possible that there is a subspecies of dragon that rose up at some point in history and started living entirely in the water, like some offshoot of regular dragons. There's all kinds.
That doesn't seem reasonable at all, if we're being completely honest. Because dragons are not nomadic creatures in this universe. So, the idea that these dragon creatures that are supposed to be at one fucking place, whatever the Tigerian thing happened in, that place where they are, that they live, and they don't really like to go other places, just magically decide, hey, now, you know what we're gonna become? Fucking dolphins. Yeah, that sounds stupid.
Of references to krakens and leviathans from different sailors across history in the novels. George R. R. Martin is always kind of ambiguous about the way he makes it seem like you never know if they're just old sailors, tall tales trying to scare people, passing into legend, or if they're legit. They're actually currently still developing the Sea Snakes 9 Voyages TV series as a prequel, but now as an
Jesus.
animated show. That would be the series where they get into a lot of those aspects of the lore, the sea-based lore. I do believe the stories are at least somewhat true, though. If dragons exist and they're like a totally normal thing, then of course other large creatures probably exist across the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. Within the Ironborn lore of the books, the Sea Stone Chair, the throne that they use as the high seat of House Greyjoy since Aegon's conquest, was actually created by the people from the western continent where Arya is sailing. And there's a big connection to Arya and Jon Snow's historical family in House Stark. During the books, Bran Stark tells the story of Brandon the Shipwright to Mira and Jojen Reed. He was one of the ancient Stark kings of winter before Aegon's conquest, who sailed west of Westeros with a fleet of ships just like Arya is doing right now, but he was never heard from again. His son Brandon the Burner was named so because he burned the shipyards after his father, the king, didn't come home in grief. But that doesn't mean that Brandon the Shipwright actually died. He was just never seen from again by anyone from Westeros. Those of you now also asking like the follow-up question, was he just another version of Bran Stark warging into someone from the distant past trying to find out what was west of Westeros? We actually started seeing this question in Game of Thrones Season 6 of the original show after he became the Three-Eyed Raven and accidentally turned Hodor into Hodor when he started controlling him from the past, from the present, connecting past and future Hodor briefly, scrambling his brain.
We saw Hodor's dick.
There are a lot of people at the time, right after that, who wondered if Bran Stark, Three-Eyed Raven, had done something similar in the distant past after the first Long Night, and he might just be the real Brandon the Builder, Bran Stark, who created House Stark. Like, Brandon the Builder is the person who started the House Stark family. He's the one who built the wall with the Children of the Forest laying their enchantments on it so that the White Walkers in the Night King couldn't pass south of it.
Well, funny you should ask. Let me get my map.
Like a lot of big theories in Game of Thrones, George R. R. Martin never really talks definitively about any of this, but I don't think this is the case. Like, I don't think that Bran Stark is all the different Bran Starks from across history. Just because the Blood Raven version of the Three-Eyed Raven would have known that Bran Stark would have done something like this and stopped him from totally messing with the timeline by doing too much in the past. Like the Hodor accident was meant to be his only real big accident, and after that, he started to figure out his powers so that he did not do that again in the future. So it wasn't like then he started going back into the past more and more and more and messing with more people across history.
Okay, very cool. No one cares.
You also have to remember that a lot of those theories are born on the TV show, and in those...
Okay, those theories are actually some of the better ones in Game of Thrones. Of all the things that, who made this, who made that, that's actually interesting. But mystery is always interesting, and that's kind of something that probably should be remembered here.
Later seasons, the TV show departed vastly from the books because there was no book material, and George R. R. Martin...
And that's when it came full fucking shitty circle.
...was not writing in the writer's room with them on all that stuff, so they just created that stuff on their own. So generally, I wouldn't look at the later seasons of Game of Thrones as being that canonical to the actual books. Like, George R. R. Martin's book story will be a little bit different, if not very different.
He's never gonna finish it, okay? It's not happening. It's literally not happening. He's never gonna finish it because he knows he can't finish it, that bitter fucking old fat fart. Anyway, that's pretty much it. There you go. Emergency awesome. 10 out of 10. Bye.